You know, welcome back to CIDC 2019 Orlando. What the heck are you doing here? You know, when we talk about security, which we're going to talk about, who is the one person that can get to every household? Thank you very much, Santa. Okay. So Arbra and I, we date ourselves when we both started clearing in 1987. Or is it 1897?
Both.
Okay. But you like photography, right?
That's, I'm an accomplished photographer. That's my hobby. And when I retire, which may not be all that long, I'm going to travel the world taking pictures.
Are you using a clearing app to do anything with it?
Actually, I do plan to do a NetTalk type app to where I can start displaying my photos on that and kind of keeping a database of all my photos.
Okay. Make sure you build some security in there.
Okay.
Welcome, Arbra.
Good morning. Welcome to Orlando. For those of you that know me, I actually live in Orlando, so I have to travel a whole 30 minutes to get here every day. But you know, it's been really good weather. In the summertime here in Florida, we usually get daily rains, but we haven't had that. And we also are usually in the mid-90s. And you know, this has been great weather. I don't even think we've hit 90 since you've been down here. So is everybody liking the world's happiest place? Well, as I said, my name is Arbra Calvert, and I actually do a lot of public speaking on security. And the people that I normally speak to are not IT professionals, though. They're business owners, they're people that belong to Rotary, to chambers of commerce, and those types of groups. And in speaking to them, a lot of times they don't know much about security. So I try and teach them about security. Now for you folks though, you're computer people. You should know about security. So I struggled a little bit in trying to find all the right topics to talk about to this group because you know a lot. In fact, I'm sure there are many in this audience that are probably more adept at security than I am. So anyway, I struggled with exactly how in 45 minutes I can cover every possible topic in security to where you go out of here and you think that now you're an expert. You think I can do that? You're right. So what I had to do is I had to boil it down to some concepts. So the things that I'm going to talk about today is number one, what's at risk if we fail to secure our networks and our apps? How to protect your valuable assets and what those assets are that you have to worry about. What are the most common threats that you're likely to see? And if there's one thing I want you to get out of this talk is I want you to have a mindset change. I want you to think differently about security than perhaps you do today. And it's not a tough thing to understand. But once you actually start using this point of view, you look at things completely different. So that's going to be one of the biggest takeaways we have. The other is just don't be stupid. I talked about the fact that I do speak to business groups that don't know much about security. So I tell them what they have to be aware of. I tell them and try and teach them how they can secure their data, how they can protect themselves from the threats that are out there. In many cases, all of you know that. But what we have to prevent is don't be stupid, because we know these things. It's just like I know when I sit down at a buffet that I shouldn't have that extra portion of meat because I'm going to wind up like that. I know it, but I don't always do it. It's going to be the same with security. We know to do these things, but sometimes we don't always do it. You have to protect your infrastructure. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about making sure we understand how to build security into our applications. But if we don't protect our infrastructure, then we're pretty much screwed. If somebody can get to our server, they can copy off all of our data. No matter what we've designed into our application, they still have our data. So we have to understand what we can do to make certain that if that does occur, that we're not at much risk. We also have to be aware of security when we're designing our applications. Okay, like it when this happens? Well, you always have a backup plan. So, and then at the end, we're going to summarize. We're going to talk about what the major takeaways are that I want you to understand from this talk. And then finally, hopefully we'll have some time for questions and discussion. Depending on the amount of time, I may ask some folks like Mike Hansen to come up, if Bruce Johnson's available, because these folks have a different level of understanding that I have. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to go into any questions that you may have. So in doing any kind of a talk, you always have to know who your audience is. Now, certainly we know that among us, we're software developers. We're IT people. But even within that, there are different groups. We have some folks in here that do commercial software. So their focus may be more on security in that type of environment. There are other folks in this audience that work for a company. All they do is internal development just for within their own company. Now you have folks like myself are custom software developers. I have customers that come to me and say, we need an app to do this, or we have this problem. What kind of solution can we come up with? But above and beyond that, all of us, and many of us, are small business owners. So we have to look at it from that perspective as well. Some of us also double as administrators on the IT staff. And the reason I'm bringing all of these things up is that we are the people that our customers rely on. We may be the people that we ourselves rely on to both advise and protect their interests and their assets. So the bottom line is our security responsibilities will differ depending upon who we are. If we're working for a software development company, your responsibility just might be for your little bit of code and for that application. If you're the business owner, then you have to be responsible for that infrastructure. You have to be responsible for that server. So all through that, our responsibilities will differ depending upon who we are. And a lot of people, when it comes to security, are like this guy. Anybody that doesn't know who this is? Mad Magazine, Alfred E. Newman. And his big thing was, what, me worry? And that's the way it is with security. A lot of people say, what? It'll never happen to me. I'm a small fish. Nobody wants my data. Why should I worry? Well, here's why. What happens if we fail? First thing might be our data. Either the data it disappears. It gets corrupted. It gets encrypted. There is a cost associated with that. Part of that cost is our time. How much time is it going to take to recover? How much money are we going to lose because we didn't do things correctly? We might lose our reputation. If we have customers and all of a sudden they have been exposed, they sometimes might blame us because we didn't do enough on our end to help protect them. We might also expose ourselves to liability, and it might affect our bottom line. So what you have to do is look at protecting those assets. For software developers, that could be your source code. I remember, how many folks remember back when it was still Clarion 2.1, there was a company called LPM. They were based out in California. Well, what happened to them was that there was an earthquake, and all of their computers and hard drives crashed during that earthquake. It put them out of business. Now, that wasn't a security thing. That was a natural disaster, but you have to think as if security is a natural disaster. It put them out of business. They lost all their source code. They had a decade or more of source code that was just gone. So you've got to protect that. If that happens to you, where are you going to be? If you have databases, all the information's again in the databases could be exposed. If there's sensitive customer information in the databases, your sensitive data, if you happen to get hit by an attack that hits your computer, your own documents, your own downloads, your own license keys, all the things that you might have on your computer, you could lose if you haven't taken the proper precautions. So what are the most common threats? And this list, it's not a complete list. It's not in any particular order, although the number one thing that I consider one of the biggest threats that we have nowadays is ransomware. Here in Florida, in the last 2 weeks, 3 different cities in the state of Florida were hit by ransomware attacks. Let me say that again. 3 different cities in Florida alone got hit by ransomware attacks. Now, I don't know how prevalent the problem is in other nations, but here in the US, that's becoming one of the biggest challenges for businesses. The city of Atlanta recently got hit by a ransomware attack. The city decided not to pay the company to unencrypt their data. Since that time, they've had to rebuild so many systems. All of their data from the criminal justice system, from the police department, was wiped out. The records from all their employee HR records, wiped out. They have spent millions of dollars to try and bring their systems back online, and now to try and protect it so that it doesn't happen again. Then you have what I call the usual suspects. You've got viruses, Trojans, keyloggers, password hack tools. You've got phishing, and now it's morphed into more of a sophisticated type of attack that's referred to as spear phishing, where they target a particular individual, a CEO of a company, someone that happens to be in an important position to where the information could be compromised. You also have internal threats. So don't just think of this from the outside. What if you have a disgruntled employee? You have somebody that's not doing a good job, and you've kind of, you've counseled them, you told them that, you got to improve or we're going to let you go. Well, they might do things to help prevent, or not prevent, they may do things to get back at you if you decide to get rid of them. And then, of course, there are intrusions through open security holes. Now, the thing about security is it's a constant challenge. It's an ever-changing landscape of threats and opportunities. We as developers, we as IT people, we as business owners have to understand the seriousness of the problem. And we got to do whatever we can to mitigate it. But understand, zero-day exploits exist today, and they're going to exist in the future. Now, for those of you that may not know what a zero-day threat is, that means that there is a vulnerability and an exploit in the wild right now, today, so that even if you do everything right, you still might be hurt. The sophistication of the threats are growing all the time. So even if you do all the best security practices, you do everything right, it doesn't mean, and it's no guarantee, that you're not going to be negatively impacted. Now you might say to yourself, well, if that's true, why should I even bother? Well, a good analogy for that is kind of like your home. Say after this conference, you fly back home, you walk in the door, and you've been robbed. What do? Well, number one thing a lot of people do, they put in a security system. They discover that their family jewels are gone. Well, they put in a safe. They make sure that it's bolted to the floor. They put in security cameras so they can see who would do it. Those are all things that they're doing, but should have been done before, because now your costs are all the costs for the security that you have, but then you've got the losses. Now you might say, well, but I've got insurance. That's going to help, mitigate the cost. Well, if you've got, say, jewelry, unless you have specific riders on your insurance policy, they normally limit the amount of payout to around $500. So you might have some real losses, plus all the time, the effort, the heartache, the vulnerability that you feel. So one of the things, like I said, this takeaway is a mindset change. One thing that you can kind of flip a switch on in your mind to try and think about security in a different way. So what is it? What's that different way to look at this security challenge? And this is it right here. Assume that you will be compromised and act as if you already have been. Let me say that again. Assume that you will be compromised and act as you already have been. I spoke earlier about if your home had been robbed, how afterwards you do the security, you add in a new lock, you add in the safe and all of that. Well, if you think about your systems, if you do that now, you save the cost of those losses that you had. If you think about the fact that you will be compromised and act as if you had, now you start thinking, well, okay, somebody got my database. How do I recover? What is it that they're going to get out of that database? So when you start doing new systems, you start thinking in a different way. It's like, well, what happens if somebody did get that data? What is it that they've got? What value do they have from that? The other thing I want you to understand is don't be stupid. As I said, I do these presentations for other business groups. They don't know how stupid they are because it's not their job. We know what we're supposed to do, and we know sometimes how stupid we are. The biggest stupidity we have happens to happen with passwords. I mean, we know they're supposed to be long. We know we shouldn't use short passwords. We all know that the most popular passwords in existence still every year after year after year when they do studies is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We know we should use uppercase, lowercase numbers, and special characters, but we don't always do it. So got a question for you. Take a look at these two passwords. Which one do you think is more secure? And by the way, the one that looks like dog, that O is really a 0. So which one do you think is more secure than the other one? So it turns out the first one, that's dog, and that's because it's one character longer. It does have the uppercase, lowercase, number, and special character. And because it's one character longer, and there's math that you can do that will show you this, it actually takes a program 95 times longer to crack that password than it does the one on the bottom. And the problem with the one on the bottom is that who can remember that? Who can possibly remember that? And one of the tips I give to the people that I talk to is to have your own core password, something that you and you alone know. I mean, it doesn't have to be fancy. It could just, but make it about 12 characters long. It could be something as simple as like, I love my wife and kids. It's just a phrase, I love my wife and kids, but change some things around, like the I's you can make to be a 1. O's can be 0s. You can put a special character, replace something else. And then when you go to do a password, say you do online banking with Bank of America, you use that core password, but to make it easy to remember, because people reuse passwords all the time, and that's one of the biggest problems, is that if somebody guesses and knows your one password, they can go to all these other sites. But if you have a core password and say you go to Bank of America, you can start your password with bank or something similar to it, your core password, and then end it with something like America. That's easy, isn't it? I mean, you go to Bank of America, you know, you've got that and you got your core password. Every password then for every site you go to can be different, but yet you can still remember it. Other stupid things we do. People look for free software all the time. You know, little utilities that do things. So we download and we install stuff. Well, that's all well and good, but you should make sure you scan it with an antivirus scanner first. Bad guys are out there. They're trying to fool you any way they can. Email stupidity. How many times have we accidentally clicked on a link and then thought afterwards, oh no? Or spear phishing, where you get an email from American Express. It looks legit, it has all the logos, everything looks exactly like what it should be, but their link really takes you someplace else. So we know that. We know we shouldn't be stupid, but sometimes we are. Perhaps the biggest stupid thing we do is we know we should back up our systems. Sometimes we don't. We get a little lazy. We forgot, oh, I'm going out tonight, I'm not going to do it, or somebody has been assigned to do it and they're on vacation. It's something you've got to do, and you have to have multiple backups. Not only that, they have to be in multiple locations. I mean, when you think of security, again, think of natural disaster. If, like here in Florida, we have to worry about tornadoes and hurricanes. So if your place gets destroyed, is that data someplace else? And another thing, especially with ransomware, you need to have a disconnected backup. Ransomware is getting so smart now that it's going to look for any backups that you have. You have an external drive on your computer, you have a backup drive on the server, it's going to try and find those and encrypt those as well. So have one that's disconnected, either online or have a rotation where something's backed up, it's disconnected, and you have another drive in there. All different types of techniques, but you need to have multiple backups, multiple locations, and one that's completely disconnected that can't be reached by the bad guys. A lot of us wind up, if we don't have it, our customers do, have outdated operating systems. Windows XP.
Arbra,
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Sure.
On this disconnected backup,
Yeah?
can Dropbox or OneDrive be one of them, or can they mess us up too?
That can be good. I mean, sometimes you got to test it. Like I said, the bad guys are getting smarter all the time. Last time I checked, they couldn't get to those accounts, but if you can get to the account from your computer and they get into your computer, then why can't they? You know, if you have an automatic login to where all they have to do is actually go to it and it automatically puts in the credentials, it's at risk.
Yeah, no, we had a client who had malware attack. They saved everything on Dropbox against our advice, and everything on Dropbox was deleted because, or messed up, because it syncs.
Right.
So I always say any of these very convenient services, they're conveniences, but they're not backups.
And even if they're good today, they may not be good tomorrow because they're always trying to come up in new ways.
We do use Dropbox, but we use their Enterprise Edition, and it backs up everything, and they give you versioning, all the different versions of the file, even after deletion.
Mm-hmm. And keep in mind too, sometimes these online backups don't always do system images, where you can restore if the whole machine is encrypted, or they reformat it, they do something. Sometimes you can't get the system image from those online backups.
We sell and we use and resell a service that everyone should have, and it's a backup that provides a VM of your system.
Right, yeah, you can basically do
You can restore back on your hardware. Just
yeah, there's
wipe it out and restore
the
over.
term escapes me, there's a term for doing a
Well,
whole
there are different-
instance.
A bunch of providers, Barracuda, Datto, there are about 8 or 10 excellent providers, and they will give you, but remember, there's a vulnerability there as well. The Texas attack on towns, they were able to crack a solution provider's password, getting into his control panel, shut down the backup for all the customers, and then go out and grab them. So you need a disconnected backup. And it'd be smart to download once a week, download your VM and put it on a disconnected device.
Right, with
That
the
way you
VMs, with the VMs, you can do your snapshot. So you can do a snapshot of the VM and.
Well, it's a perpetual backup. You'll back up 4 or 5 times a day that way.
Okay,
And you can recover a complete network in a few hours with that system. So I strongly recommend it for anybody who's not using a virtual backup like that.
so anyway, keep in mind though, with different OSs, they are expiring. Windows 7 is the big one. It's coming up here in less than 4 months. Windows 7 and Server 2008. After January 14th, it will lose any further support. So keep that in your plans, because eventually there's going to be, if they become unpatched, you're going to have vulnerabilities. Other stupid things people don't do, they don't keep their operating systems up to date. They don't have antivirus software installed. Not keeping your installed software up to date. I mean, if you don't keep your SQL Server patched, that could be a problem. Your browsers, if you're not keeping those up to date. Adobe Reader, that's a good one. A lot of people think if you download a brand new version of Adobe Reader, it's the latest version. Many times it's not. First thing I do if I have to install a new instance of that, download it and go into Help and do an update. More times than not, there's another update waiting. Same with your Windows updates. Sometimes you go in and you'll do a Windows update, it'll reboot and it'll come up and it might even say, yep, you're up to date, but hit that check button to check it, and a lot of times there's updates to the updates. Flash players is a big one. It's actually going to go away here soon. Java, my recommendation to clients is that if you don't use Java, don't have it installed. There are some serious zero-day exploits available right now that haven't been patched in years. And the best things, like I said, I tell them, if you don't think you're using it, uninstall it. If you're not sure, uninstall it. If you come across something and you need it, just go to java.com, download a new version, and usually you're good. People don't keep their antivirus up to date. People connect to open Wi-Fi networks. How many people here have connected to the Wyndham Meetings Wi-Fi network? Come on, let's see the hands. Now, for those of you that are using a VPN, keep your hand up. So that's the right thing to do. If you're using a network like that, still use a VPN. That way it'll encrypt all of your data and protect you. Entering credentials or other sensitive information on websites that doesn't have an SSL certificate. Now, for those of you that saw the training by Bruce, you know, certificates are cheap. So if you're doing something that's using a website or NetTalk or whatever, Let's Encrypt, it's a free certificate, costs you nothing. In fact, just this week I had a customer that has a Windows 2012 server. They became a new customer about a year or so ago, and they had a 3-year certificate that just died. So I went out to Let's Encrypt. There are some tools that you can have. Downloaded this tool, installed a new SSL certificate, and it has in this tool the ability to automatically renew. You can set it to renew in 30 days, 60 days, but the certificates expire in 90 days. Other stupid things we do, we don't have firewalls, either on the network or on the local computer. We don't update the BIOS of some of our devices, either our computers or especially routers and firewalls. That's as most of you know, when you get a new router in, first thing you should do is update to the latest firmware, without a doubt. Not changing default usernames and passwords. Now, how many people here have Windows servers? How many of you also have an account called administrator? See, first thing I do when I set up a new box is I create a brand new administrator account. And it could be anything you want. I mean, like you can make a Gandalf, because you know with Gandalf what he says, "Thou shalt not pass." So set up a new administrator account and either completely delete or disable the administrator account, because the bad guys know that too many people leave that administrator account there. They can try and hack in through RDP or some other way and try and crack your password. Sometimes if you look at the security logs on a Windows server, you'll see all these attempts. So if you don't have an administrator password and they don't know what the administrator username is, it's a cheap and easy way to help protect that server from that type of an attack. And of course, you know, we all know what the default username and admin account is for SQL Server. So it's best to not use those. Other things we need to do is we need to protect our infrastructure. Limit the physical access to the device. Have a server room. If you've got servers, have a server room that's locked or protected access. Same with wiring closets. Same with even the Ethernet ports in your network. Somebody can very easily plug in a device that has port scanning on it, or that it has a packet sniffer, to where they can sniff all the unencrypted traffic on your network. So secure those. And then if you're doing, and I have some customers that do a lot of credit card processing, we've actually gone through and created a totally separate network within their corporate structure to where only credit card enabled devices are allowed on that segment of the network. And then we even further restricted it by saying that only devices that are in a MAC list are allowed to access that. So that way, even if somebody tries to plug into that, if we don't have that MAC address in that firewall, they're not going to be able to connect. On firewalls, you need to close all the unused ports. I mean, even things, I don't have it in the slide, but even RDP. A lot of people probably use RDP to get into remote stuff for their server. And of course, the default port for that is what, 3389, right? So change the port to something else. The bad guys are going to be scanning for that. Now, they may scan others too, but they're going to look at 3389 first. So if you change it to something else, very simple to do, and it might just help prevent an intrusion. Routers, turn off any external facing UP&P, you know, for your universal plug and play. Universal plug and play isn't secure, not in the least. So being aware of security when you design your app. We talked before about the mindset change, how if you assume that you've already been compromised, how would you go back in time to redesign your app? What would you do different? You know, think about the data that you're storing. I mean, people think I'm crazy, but since I do a lot of custom software, when the customers ask me, well, they want to save certain type of information, I question them. I say, do you really need that information? What good is it going to do you? How are you going to use that information? They say they want to keep Social Security information. I'm like, why? You know, do you need it for validation purposes? Do you need it for something else? If it's already in a different system, say an HR system, why do you need it in another system? Can you instead store a hash of that Social Security number? Because if you need to validate against something else, you get the information from the other system, you hash that, you compare it to the hash that's in your system. You've done it and you haven't had any information in your system that can be compromised. Don't store credit card information at all if you can possibly help it in your systems. Have that stored on the credit card processor system. If you're in, say, the hospitality industry, and you need to kind of be able to hold a transaction, hold that credit card so you can charge the customer when they finally check out, well, a lot of the credit card processors have different techniques to where you don't have to store that credit card information. You can store a token or some other information that they give you that uniquely identifies that credit card transaction. If you absolutely positively must store sensitive data, encrypt it. If it's not going to be unique, then try and salt it before you encrypt it. Because if you have the possibility that the hashes can be identical, that means if somebody guesses somebody's password and they know the hash, they can look through that database for any other hashes that are identical. And then if you are putting in configuration information that has connection strings, and sometimes you might actually have to have credentials that you store there, encrypt it. Consider building backup tools in your application. Make it easy for your customers to back up their data. Consider even having things to where you can automatically schedule backups. Make sure that perhaps you can store it in different places. And as I mentioned before, have multiple backups and multiple locations, preferably with one disconnected. Secure your app with login credentials if it's appropriate. If you've got sensitive information, you want to make sure that only those who are authorized to access the data can. And build in rules such as you can build in customizable rules such as password length, password complexity, failed login attempts. And that can be important, especially for the automated hacking tools. Say you can set a counter that after 3 or 4 or whatever number you want, logins are unsuccessful, you lock that account. And to make it easy so that you're not always having to go in and unlock the account, you can say, pause it for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes. So that way it limits the number of attempts against that password. Since it may actually wind up being in the trillions of possible combinations, if you've got a long password with uppercase, lowercase numbers, and special characters, you want to prevent it from ever getting that close to where they can crack it. And then consider restricting access to sensitive data by user rules. And normally you might think you might have like an admin account, so you restrict it only to admins, but you may have, if you have HR information, you may want to restrict it to just to those who have an HR role and not to the administrator. Let me do this again. Oh, okay. Okay. Let's see if I'm where I was.
Oh, yeah, I'm just going to go T. Yeah, T, nothing about it.
Consider restricting access and listing information on certain forms, on reports, and on exports. If somebody gets into your system and they can export all the data, you've still lost your data. So anyway, once you've done all of that, test it. Now you can set your own schedule, but you probably at least want to test your network quarterly. You want to perform vulnerability testing. You want from the outside to be able to see what ports are open, what file sharing is set, if there are any vulnerabilities. Perform IDS intrusion monitoring, which is intrusion detection systems that could be on your system that is looking at all the network traffic, looking for weird things going on, looking for either DDoS attacks, looking for password attacks, all the types of threats that can happen. Perform a security audit. And of course, every company is different, so you'll have to put together your own plan to maybe make sure that all the operating systems are up to date. Every machine's got antivirus. You do yourself an audit list and do that audit on a regularly scheduled basis. Consider hiring a penetration testing company because they're going to be more expert than you are, and then they can tell you where the holes are and then how to fill those holes. And perhaps most important of all, test your backups. Make sure you can actually restore. I've seen situations where people thought they had really good backup until they needed to restore, and all of a sudden it didn't work. So anyway, in conclusion, change your mindset. Again, if you think of in terms of you will be compromised or assume that you already have been compromised, you start looking at things a little bit differently. You might start putting a higher priority on spending that money to do the security, spending the time. Pay attention to your infrastructure security, because you can do everything in your app correctly, but if they've gotten to your server and can copy off your data or encrypt it or do anything else, you're still vulnerable. Be aware that and assume that if you've been compromised, how can they not really get any data from your application? And then finally, don't be stupid. Thank you. Any questions?
How do you spell stupid? No. Any questions?
And Mike and Bruce, if you want to come on up, they might have questions for you. Y'all know more than I do.
Arbra, one comment and then a question. You didn't mention, I don't think, keep your drive, which is something kind of new coming out from especially server providers, where if they replace a hard drive that's damaged, you can keep it and destroy it rather than having to return it to HP or to Lenovo or someone like that. So you can retain physical control of your data and not just have the drive go away.
Right, yeah, there are a lot of free utilities out there that will allow you to do military-grade wiping of drives if it's still an operating drive. But yeah, and there are programs where you can send dead drives that they guarantee that they completely destroy all the data on it. I know Dell actually has such a program.
Right. Second, my question, what's your opinion of encrypting the hardware at rest so that we have a server where one of the vendors wants us to encrypt the drive itself and then lay their application on top of it. I'm a little back and forth about it because if the server's up, the drive's unencrypted because it's got to read the application. So it's not really a preventative measure there. But I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Certainly having an encrypted drive has a lot of value, especially even for like laptops, something that can disappear. It can be a little bit more problematic if you run into boot problems and things like that. So there are trade-offs. Sometimes there's also a performance hit depending upon the specs of the particular machine. So yeah, it's a good security measure, but just understand that you want to have a good backup because if sometimes it can be more difficult to recover from situations if you have encrypted hard drives.
You mentioned testing your backups. If you use one of the virtual backup services that create a VM for you, they will let you spin them up in the cloud so you can validate your image anytime you want to. In fact, you should do that once a day or have on a regular schedule, once a day or once a week. You mentioned network segmentation, which is a huge benefit. If you've got credit card data or health data, you've got to segment your network.
Right.
Remember, when you do that, it doesn't work unless you're using a router or a switch that allows you to write firewall rules into the unit that is doing the segmentation so that you control the traffic between segments.
Absolutely.
Hey, hockey boy.
A thought I had on encrypted drives and servers, the encrypted drive really only gives you real benefit if that's a portable device or a device you don't have any control over. So if you have your servers in a cabinet that you control, in a data center somewhere that has appropriate controls, then there are multiple barriers before they can reach that physical device and pull that drive. So the only time it really matters to have a server with an encrypted drive is when that server can walk away on its own, or
I
when
would
the drive
agree.
can walk away. So we use encrypted drives for, laptops that have sensitive data that travel. So
Well, that's why when you mentioned that was the first thing I talked about was that, yeah, for laptops and stuff like that, great. But you're right, if you've got things already secured, if you've got good security in a server room and stuff like that, then yeah, it doesn't always make a lot of sense to encrypt the drive.
and the only caveat is if you're a target, if you are a specified target. If the NSA's out to get you, you're done anyway.
Okay. Oh, Tommy.
One more, because lunch is back. And
Ooh.
Been the first.
Okay. One thing, one of the biggest vulnerabilities is always just your own people, the people working in the company. And you mentioned the spear phishing and so on like that. And an excellent resource for that is a company called KnowBe4 with the number 4, right? Just go to their website, knowbe4.com. And they have free tools, they do training, they'll do spear phishing attacks on your company and, register what's going on. Really highly recommended. Really good educational tool too.
Excellent.
Okay. Go to lunch, but.
wait, before you go to lunch.
What?
Well, there's something happening now.
No.
Yep.
But I got something to.
We have
So-
something planned.
We have
Yes.
something planned.
No, we don't.
John, could you just come a minute?
They should come up on
Anyway,
the
what I want to
stage.
say, can I say something?
You can say something
Okay,
quickly.
so after lunch, after Mike talks, anybody that has their T-shirt on, I really would like you guys to come here and take a picture with me, okay? If you have the T-shirt on, you can wear it backwards or forwards. I want a picture here,
Come on.
okay?
Come on up.
What?
Come here. Come here. Where? Well, are we in shot? Are we in shot? We're in shot. All right. So this is, as you know, the 10th anniversary of Clarion Live. And it's a birthday party of sorts, isn't it? And so we thought it would be nice at a birthday party to have presents. So a bunch of people have brought presents. So the guys can bring that in now for John and for Arnold.
Really?
Because they've been doing this for 10 years. Something like 520 webinars? Something like that?
Seems like more.
520 every Friday for the last 10 years. They run about 2 to 3 hours per webinar. So if you want to go watch them back to back, just as a recap, I highly recommend that. It's about 1,500 hours out of your life you won't get back.
Oh,
So,
are you serious?
yep, you can. This is not me. This is not me. This is everyone here.
Wow.
And I know one or two have still got stuff and they haven't brought down from their room, so they'll come down and add this
Whoa.
during the lunch break.
Happy birthday.
And I hope you brought an extra suitcase.
And,
I hope
and,
I brought an extra teacher.
Thank you.
So,
and I think on behalf
guys,
of the entire Clarion community, we all want to thank you. You've made this such a great resource for us, a good way for us to learn. Thank you so much.
yeah, let's give it up for John Arnold.
You're more than welcome.
If he doesn't cry, he made a stone. Say something.
You know, we did this, and when John and I started, we say, we will never have a fee for it, but we've been blessed beyond a membership fee, let me tell you. It's been satisfying, really satisfying. And when people come up to us and tell it helps them, that's like,
That's the reward.
that's
yeah.
the reward. And this is like bonus. This is like,
So unexpected.
There's no flat screen TVs. They're just tokens of our appreciation.
Thank you, everyone, really. Thank
yeah.
you.
God, this is, did you say you brought another suitcase for me?
Well,
Okay.
all those boxes with shirts and I.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Enjoy lunch and come back. If you have your T-shirt, please take a picture with me. And John, here. After
Sounds
lunch, before the session.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Can you take a picture for me?
Oh my God. Serious.